Welcome everyone to what I hope is going to be a really fascinating and interactive discussion with all of you about new conceptions for how we think about public participation. I think there's some way in which the way we think about citizen engagement in the 21st century that really mimics this idea of, taking the offline form and just plopping it online has sort of translated to how we think about engagement. We take what is a fundamentally broken offline process. I don't know how many of you have recently been to a public meeting and had a great time, and sort of translated that to a digital space. And I think we're missing some really fundamental pieces there about why the public participation process is broken. So I'm hoping that this session will really challenge all of us to think differently about public participation, what ramifications that might have for American democracy and how we think about the role of the citizen in American democracy. And I can't think of, and so please challenge us, and we hope to challenge you to think outside the box about this. I can't think of anyone better to have a conversation with that can help spur some of those new ideas than Mayor Christopher Cabaldon from the city of West Sacramento here in California. Mayor Cabaldon has been mayor of West Sacramento for 17 years. He's the longest serving mayor in the history of West Sacramento, but West Sacramento is only 28 years old. So he's the dictator of directly elected dictator of West Sacramento. I think, what would you go, 85% of the vote or something like that in the last election. Yeah, so high citizen satisfaction. That's great. 85% of the vote, and I should say higher than average voter turnout. So it wasn't like a super depressed electorate either. So he's also one of our city partners and has been instrumental in bringing Code for America to West Sacramento. And you're going to hear a lot more about the work that the fellows in West Sacramento are doing on the main stage later this week. But when we started working with Mayor Cabaldon and his staff, even before the fellows arrived, it became clear that he was going to help push our thinking. This was just when we were starting to think about what has now become for us a focus area of Code for America's work, communications and engagement, which we'll be talking about on the main stage on Friday. And we had, he was sort of irritated with us, if it's fair for me to say that, thinking that we were going to come in and do sort of these the traditional forms of engagement that just weren't working well. It really pushed our thinking, and by the end of this first conversation we were really vibing about can we redesign public meetings together? So now that we're closing in on the end of the fellowship, it's really exciting to be here and sort of have a conversation about the future of public participation and the role of the citizen in 21st century government. And so I'm going to hand it over to Mayor Cabaldon to just sort of set up how he thinks about this. And he's going to refer back to some stuff we heard on the main stage, which I think will be really interesting for all of us as well. So, Mayor Cabaldon.
Yeah, my deputy Ian is here, and when we had that first call with Catherine about the fellowship, Ian was almost showing me a sign, stop yelling at her, because I was just going on about civic engagement, and at the end she said, yeah, I agree. This question around civic engagement started for me when I was very first elected to the city council. Like most brand new city council members, I had just discovered this whole process and all the leverage points that the city could have in people's lives, and where was everybody? I came to my council meeting and there were 11 people watching. It was this 10 of the same plus one rotating person. So let's go out and meet all over the place. Let's have meetings in the school. Let's meet our other places. And we did that, and people would come. They would never come again, but they would come to that one meeting. But I was really trying to, we're doing major things here. This is the budget. I read in public administration school, the budget's the most important decision that we make. So shouldn't everybody be here? We're going to condemn this piece of property. We're deciding whether that neighborhood gets a park or that neighborhood gets a park, or where the dump goes. Where is everybody? So staff, we need to get a program together to make sure that there's hundreds of people at our meetings. And we started doing that, and we had no success really. And then my county supervisor said to me one day, we're just having the same conversation, and we are trying to get people out to the county board of supervisors meetings because nobody's there for our budget. And it struck me that I hadn't gone to their meeting, and any of their meetings ever. And I didn't know what they were doing, and I thought, oh my God, am I one of the undiagnosed, disenfranchised people in America that has been shut out of government? And it caused me to think a little bit more about my first presumption, which was that there were all these folks who needed to be engaged and needed to be at my meetings, engaged in my decisions and my choices, that just were somehow failing to show up. And because I didn't see myself as a failure at the county, so why was I conceiving of all these folks in this way? I think part of our challenge is the words that we use are all very, very positive. It's like we're talking about bunnies and babies and engagement and participation. They are unidirectionally positive terms, and therefore more is always better of them. There is no maximum for civic engagement. It's always, whatever it is, let's go for even more. But our conception of what that means is still rooted in these 20th century notions, where we measure that by how many people came to a meeting, how many people spoke up at the meeting. And so as I thought more about that question, for me it raises issues around privilege, around reductionism, and around impact and faith in government that I hadn't really thought about at all. So this is what you get when you serve in office for a long period of time, and you realize how many mistakes that you have made in your understanding about these questions. But when we were saying let's get people engaged by getting the meetings, that meant time to them. It was engagement to us. It was participation to us. For them, it was, I have to not tutor my daughter in algebra on Tuesday. I have to miss American Idol on whatever night that happens. Wednesdays. I have to miss American Idol on Wednesdays. Really, is your thing more important than my life? And who are you to decide that? I thought when you ran, Mr. Mayor, you said you were going to rebuild downtown and fix up the waterfront. I thought you were going to do that. Now you want me to come to all of your meetings? Are you going to come and tutor my daughter in algebra on Friday night to make up for it? So I realized that the demands that we were making on people had their own cost to them, and that was not universally, it was not equitably felt. Right? That folks who had to work 2 jobs, or had kids versus folks who didn't have kids, folks who had to translate, we had to translate agendas into Ukrainian or into Hmong instead also struggled more. So asking them to participate in our decisions was a steeper lift for them. That it wasn't equitable simply to say, everybody come, or here's a tool for everybody to participate. So it was change, our efforts to bring more people in, unless they were going to be perfectly successful, were almost certainly over the long run going to be bringing in a warped sense of what the community was really all about. And so that we were, in some sense, reinforcing the traditional privilege in the city in terms of who gets to make decisions and who doesn't, by taking the entertainment value of public decision making and making it something that required you to spend Thursday night, Wednesday night, whatever, in order to participate. So there was that problem. And then the other fundamental challenge was this reductionism question. And what does that mean? Well, we have tended to treat in government outcomes and instruments and technology as 2 completely separable things. So at least in California, I'm required to develop a general plan every 10 or 20 or 30 years that is essentially the grand vision for the city, written in broad brush terms. What do you really want your community to be like? So we go through that every couple decades, and some people come out and help us do that. And then, so we do that. We say, and you say, I want a walkable downtown that I can go visit grandma and church and shop nearby, and where I know everybody, where there's lots of trees and I can bike and I'm not going to get run over and kids can play in the street. These are the feelings, these are the experiences that I want to have in my community. So you say that in 1987, and then between 1987 and 1997, every Thursday we're saying to you, do you want, should we allow an apartment building to go on the corner? And most people say no, they don't like apartment buildings, even apartment dwellers. So no apartment buildings. Okay, should our streets be 7 lanes wide or 2 lanes wide? Well, I don't like traffic, so I'd say 7 lanes wide. Should there be free parking or no free parking? Well, I like free parking, so I would like to. Yes, let's have more free parking. If you add all those individual decisions up, you cannot get to what you decided in 1987 was your vision, because that requires density, it requires mixed use, it requires that not everybody drive everywhere, it requires streets that are at human scale. And so, but we've acted as though you can specify both. And so we ask citizens to on an intertemporal basis specify their big outcome that they want, and then we ask them every single intermediate decision along the way. So I've framed this as the Weight Watchers cheesecake problem a lot, which is you join Weight Watchers with a goal to watch your weight, and what you don't want is Weight Watchers then to every single day say, would you like the cheesecake with or without whipped cream? What you want is Weight Watchers to not ask you about the cheesecake at all. You want to insulate yourself from your baser instincts, in some sense, that Weight Watchers is a compact that you reach with other similarly intentioned people to control your day-to-day passions, essentially, around a longer-term, higher-level goal that you share. That's essentially what government's all about, right? That if I look at my Facebook feed, if people's moment-by-moment instincts drove government, we would all be in a lot of, we're already in a lot of trouble, but we'd be in much worse trouble. Government is in part a compact that we reach together to say, hey, let's not just let our moments, government's not a mood ring. Let's not let our moment-by-moment opinions drive every single thing that occurs. And instead, let's figure out how we bind ourselves to a set of collective outcomes that require some things that we may not like giving up the cheesecake or giving up the free parking. So that's, I think, the key element of the kind of the challenge to the orthodoxy around civic engagement. I think technology is not the point of it, but technology's raised this question because it's we're at a fork on the road where you can either try to figure out what's the best technology to get more people to that public hearing, or how do we move the public hearing to some sort of to some other virtual space that can occur, as opposed to really rethinking what actually does it mean to be a citizen in the first place. What does citizenship individually, what does citizenship collectively look like? How does that occur in a collective sense that is attentive to issues around equity, as opposed to simply engagement is around individuals expressing in some way their opinion at that moment, adding it up, and then driving government in that direction.
Do you want to go into these, or?
Well, you want to prompt me about it?
Well, yes. So, I was struck I've got a whole bunch of questions that raises, but I was struck during the presentation on City Voice this morning that City Voice, a tool that we're very proud of at Code for America and think has a lot of potential to help us achieve a 21st century government, embeds a little bit of the concern and the fear that you're expressing, that we're asking people to give these sort of micro feedback elements along the way without any sense of how that connects up to that larger vision. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on, how we might design, because it's an iterative tool, we can build it and change it. But how we might design City Voice so that it achieves what you're setting out for. And so maybe you can answer that question in the context of some of the slides you brought. Sorry.
Yeah, so for the City Voice app, if you happen to be in the restroom during that presentation,
I'm sure you were all there.
The essence of it providing a very, very simple, easy to access, quick way for citizens to provide direct, quick feedback on the design of a playground in a particular neighborhood. So very, very, very simple idea, very easy way. So dramatically lowering the bar about how to give some feedback. I actually think that's a fantastic approach because I think one way to deal with the public hearing traditional system is to provide lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of opportunities for input all the time. Right, so rather than sum it up, okay, this is the one Thursday night where this decision is going to get made, we want your input on this one question, how can we create the mechanisms like we do in in the consumer world to provide lots and lots of cues about what our needs, our momentary interests, our pain points are? And so to me, that's an example of how to do that. It's the key, one of the keys at least, is not to think of it though as an aggregating a vote. Right, it's how you use that information. So at the end of the day, the City Voice report back to the mayor and the city council is 11 people said they want a dog park, and 12 people said they want a tot lot, and 2 people said they wanted just sand. Then therefore tot lot. Right, that's the temptation, and that you start to use these mechanisms that are really trying to understand people's experience and make a use case, and instead translate them into a poll. Or into a kind of a quasi-election. So it's really about the use of it. And it was really key because what I found funny about it was the dog park question, because this is one of those areas that I struggle with. So forget the public hearing at the city council meeting. When we do a new park in the city, we're typical. We will have a meeting of the neighborhood. Come to a meeting on Tuesday night where we're going to talk about what this park should be like. And so folks come to the meeting and in a typical new neighborhood that we have, it's more urban, more smart growthy, more dense. They will come and the residents there say, I want a dog park. I have a dog, I have no kids, I have a dog, and I want a dog park. Okay, that's so far so good. They get to the meeting, and what happens is someone says, what about a tot lot? Often somebody who has no children, so it's not really a user experience case. Somebody's saying, shouldn't there be a tot lot? Aren't we a place that cares about children? And then you, the dog owner, cannot say, but I don't have any kids, and I'm planning on it. I do have 2 dogs, because you sound like a jerk. That somebody doesn't care about kids. And so at the end of the meeting, everyone has agreed that number 1 is tot lot. Number 2 is dog park, but number 1 is tot lot, even if there's not a single family with kids in that neighborhood. So this is a fun. We know this from group psychology that this will be the outcome. We can combat it in part by sharing data, underlying data about base rates and all that. But you need to understand that that's the likely outcome of the meeting. So maybe discount the tot lot effect of a meeting. But the other problem is often what is really needed is something that neighborhood meeting will never come up with, which. What many neighborhoods lack are basketball courts or other facilities for teenagers, which no one in these community meetings speaks up for. Because teenagers often evokes the idea of people from other neighborhoods, people from other backgrounds, coming in to my neighborhood and causing crime. Right? So hardly anyone ever in these meetings ever says, yes, what I want is a basketball court, when that might be the most significant community-wide deficit that there is. So this is the kind of challenge that simply relying on sort of point-in-time opinions can present, whether it's in a city council hearing or in just a facilitated kind of quasi-deliberative neighborhood meeting. But the folks that come out to this are folks who have opinions in the first place. And I guess the last thing I'd say about this dimension of it is as I look at my own Facebook feed, there are sets of people, some of whom are constantly expressing opinions. And they enjoy that, right? The opinion part of their being is the primary one. There are others who, food and cats are their thing. It isn't though that the food and cat people don't have life experience. It's not as though they're not using the park. It's not as though they don't use the bus system. They do. It's simply they have not organized their life to maximize around opinion. So when we pay attention to when we ask an opinion-based question without paying attention to patterns of behavior, when we don't pay attention to a real use case, like anyone here would do, follow somebody's journey, live in their shoes for a little bit to see what's really going on. When we only activate the part of the brain as generated instant opinion, we are empowering a specific set of people with a particular psychology within a community that is not necessarily representative.
So could it be as simple as just what questions you ask people, and where and how? Are we done here? Oh, all right.
I do think that's a big part of it. So we should be asking many more of the what do you want questions, not in the sense of just what new thing would you like to have, because people have a long list of those things, and often I see a lot of the participatory budgeting and other kinds of programs that are really about that. They're about how do we allocate good new things. Right, so what's our participation process for that? I wish that was most of my job as a mayor, allocating good new things, but I also have to allocate dumps, jails, homeless shelters, methadone clinics. I have to allocate those. And the processes that we think about working for participatory budgeting are not so good for those. And I have to do lots of stuff that's kind of scientific. And stuff that's kind of maybe scientific. The first one is what chemicals should go in the water treatment plant to make sure that your water's clean. No one ever says, let's have a public meeting about that. They're like, okay, let's trust the scientists. If we're building a new road, is the lane going to be 10 feet or 11 feet wide? Most people say, let's not have a public meeting about that. Let's ask the traffic engineer. And the traffic engineer is paying attention to all the science and the data and the evidence from everywhere else about what's the most safe of those lines. But then suddenly you get to the dog park and the tot lot, and suddenly it's some sort of mystical experience that I'm trying to get out of you. And if we ask more of the questions, and I don't mean necessarily in a survey, but if we try to derive more of the questions like, do you want a place that's do you want to be in a place that is lively and diverse with lots of cultural collisions and activity and creativity, or do you want to be in a place that is quiet, that you can let your kids run free and not worry about it, right? The different kinds of cases with pictures, with smells, with sounds, with direct questions, with a range of kinds of questions that anyone can participate in, that you don't have to have a law degree or accounting degree in order to provide feedback. That's the key context. Then in the specifics, if you ask lots and lots of these questions in the kind of way that City Voice does, so that it's contextualized, but what the kind of the North Star of what kind of community we're creating, that I think is the right balance between the big picture and the small.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, the thing that I struggle with and that sort of keeps me, I mean, it seems like there's a fundamental tension here between, you know, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and people just feeling like they are content. And we talk a lot about like the happiest countries in the world, and not sure how that gets measured, but I think there's also this value that we have, particularly in American democracy, that participation and like having your voice recognized and heard and being able to speak is a value in and of itself. And it makes me wonder about you know, what happens if and when people are fully kind of satisfied? You know, they don't need to come and voice their opinion because you're doing what they want you to do. So how do you balance that tension of like knowing that people aren't participating because they're kind of okay with what's going on versus, you know, being really excited that lots of people are participating, but it's because they're not happy with the situation? And then how do you know when people aren't showing up that there's representation in the silence too, right? That it isn't just that people aren't speaking up because they can't, or they don't feel empowered to. So just as a lawmaker, as a elected official, as someone who has power, how do you make sure that this isn't just a convenient way for you not to have to engage in those conversations?
That is such a good, it's exactly the right question, because if just paying attention to it from a city council dais, you cannot tell the difference. Are folks not coming here because they are satisfied enough? Or are they not coming here because they don't know about it, can't, are actually disenfranchised? And there's obviously a big gap between disenfranchised and fully satisfied. Now, it's not that hard in the real world to be able to at least get a reasonable guess based on the traditional factors that drive enfranchisement and disenfranchisement, but it's not enough. Which is why I think, you know, part of what I've been struggling with over the last year is how to take the user-centered design lessons that we've been learning from being at Code for America City and applying them to government citywide, and to not as a replacement for civic engagement, but as an institutionalized way of doing civic engagement differently. Because in that process, we should discover that. We should discover whether folks are not coming to our hearings on the bus system because they're satisfied, or because it's completely a mystery to them about how it could possibly work for them. If part of our process, in addition to asking for the fiscal analysis and asking our city attorney to review the item, give us a report on the user analysis in the use case that was considered, it would start to formalize the expectation that you're actually going to walk that journey as a way to triangulate the opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's another thing we sort of wrestled with, and that's the thinking that you pushed us on, particularly in the West Sacramento project. I don't want to steal the thunder of the fellows who are going to present that later, but it was very much about participation, not is a little bit more passive version of public participation, which was, you know, interviewing people who might use the tool, who might be affected by it. I'm looking at Grant, who is one of the West Sacramento fellows, that can talk a little bit more about the process that they went through. You weren't activating citizens in order to go vote or write a letter to the editor, or some of the traditional ways that we think of participation, but it was sort of like extracting in a sensory way what citizens really need and want. And I got to be honest, I kind of struggle with that frame as participation. And I think does the process, and I'd love to hear what folks here think as well, the process of doing user-centered design, are we happy when we get to the end of it? It just says, like, we built a tool, we went through this process, and this is what we sensed that people wanted, and we're still like getting data, A/B testing, whatever, that's telling us this is what we want, but there's no active sort of, you know, citizens sort of unite and I don't know what the actual phrase is, but you know what I'm saying. And I wonder if maybe you or Grant, I don't know if I'm putting you on the spot, or anyone else has some feeling about that.
I have a lot of thoughts about this conversation. I don't know if that's directly kind of what you're asking right now.
Okay.
But I'll try to make them do so.
Okay, stand up so everyone can hear you. Sorry, there's only one mic.
Yeah, my name is Grant Smith, and I am a current West Sacramento fellow. Is that all right?
Sure. Hi, Grant.
Everyone at once. So, like Bracy was saying, what we did to engage people in the West Sacramento community through the course of our project was reach out to them, meet them where they were, and ask specific questions about the projects that we had sort of already decided were viable based on the larger body of knowledge that we had collected through initial conversations with citizens, but also from information that we received through the West Sacramento government and other organizations, business owners, and community members in the city. And so that was sort of our mode of this citizen engagement. And I think that's great. I think that's like a part of the pieces of the puzzle that need to really solve some of the questions that are being discussed. And that maybe another piece is how do you figure out whether or not you're addressing the problem of disenfranchisement versus the fully satisfied citizens. And so I think we can draw from examples of other national governments that do happiness surveys and that do sort of big picture collection, and maybe from businesses that focus on like really striving for perfection, like Disney, who take the surveys that they give their customers, and if anyone says like less than a 10 out of 10, they need to follow up on that and figure out like, well, you were only a 9 out of 10. Like, why are you a 9 out of 10? Like, we are really trying to hit everyone here, and we especially want to figure out in the case where you're not happy, like why you're not happy. So reaching out on the big picture to make sure that we're meeting everyone where they are, and then like filling in the gaps by mostly doing the like we know as the government from all of this data that we have, both big picture and piece by piece city voice collection style. Like we look at that data and we try and listen to you both big picture and on specific issues, and then take action based on that.
Is that a fundamentally paternalistic way of thinking about engagement?
So I would say no. Because you are making sure to reach out both on the big picture and on the individual issues about what it is. You're making an active effort to reach out to people where they are, and also you always have these sort of these passive channels for people to reach out to you. And like when they give you that 9 out of 10 on one of those passive channels, you know, then you respond to them. That's your 311 service, your 911 service. Something goes wrong, you have that service there always in place. So like, you're trying to hit a bunch of different points with a bunch of different tools and bring them all together. And like, it is a little bit paternalistic. I've heard people express fear that they don't want Google to be their government, or they don't want their government to be like Google. And like, I understand the fear there, and like I think we need to work hard to trust each other on both sides of the aisle. Citizens trusting the government trusting their citizens, so that like the transparency is there and the fear goes away. And like these sorts of interactions work in both directions, and we can confirm like in every possible way that citizens actually are happy, they're not disenfranchised, because like we're actively seeking that out in every way possible.
And do you think that when you did your user testing, did you have the sense, or do you get the sense with the tool that you guys are going to be releasing soon, that citizens understand their interaction with that tool, their interaction with you as participation? Do they feel efficacy, like they have made a difference in their community and affected how their government works? And do we run the risk of, if we make it too passive and we just, are sensing from how they behave what they want, that they don't ever understand that they are participating, that we've lost something fundamental that is valuable? I guess I asked that. I feel like I'm putting Grant too much on the spot here, but so I asked that of both of you. If you want to contribute to an answer to that.
Maybe I can add a related question. Is like how much is part of your product creating an experience of feeling like you are an engaged citizen, that you are part of creating the democracy?
These are particularly interesting questions because our product has to do with urban agriculture. And I think if you go around your city and you see a garden or a farm, and you see the pretty flowers or the tasty produce, you probably connect that to pretty flowers or tasty produce a lot more strongly than you connect that to my government passed great zoning policies in order to facilitate the advent of this pretty garden in my neighborhood. So like when we're collecting feedback on software applications, which are perhaps even another level removed, that surround these policies and urban agriculture products that are farms, that the answer is largely no. The citizen is most of the time not going to recognize that they're participating with their government in order to build a better community. But what they will recognize is that they're participating as a part of their community to build a better community. So, like, maybe sort of this distinction between government and community goes away when everything is being done really, really well.
I think there's also that's exactly right. But the city is, it's tempting to think of a city as a small version of a state, which is a small version of the national government, and then democracy is simply scaled. You know, the same concepts are the same. But it isn't, right? At least for my residents and the residents of the cities that I know around, the 22 of them, their primary view of their local government is not in the civic discourse value setting way that you might have around issues of Planned Parenthood or militarization or whatever. Those issues can pop up, but their main interaction, their main sense of ownership over the city is primarily as a glorified homeowners association. It's mainly as a service. It's mainly, did you pick up my trash? Does the water come out of the pipe? Is the toilet flush? It is a mistake to forget that that's the principal interaction, as opposed to a grand, the folks coming together in the agora to agree on, to have a high-spirited debate about values. Those occur, and they are definitely in context of the kinds of, as Brent said, and they translate through zoning and everything else down, but they never appear, or rarely appear, in the same way as some high-drama congressional debate about Planned Parenthood funding. And so as we think about what the mechanisms are and how people feel whether they control it or not, because it's controlled through all these mechanisms, and because a city is fundamentally a platform for stuff like this, we're a platform for other people to do stuff. People sometimes say, what's your 5-year plan for affordable housing? Well, my 5-year plan is to do this much stuff, and then hope that the right developer comes along with the right community partner, and the right thing happens. But if that doesn't happen, then I'll probably work on urban ag for that next year, because there's no possibility for it. The city does not control the environment in that way. And so we often create that expectation when we go to a neighborhood for a public participation forum and say, what do you want to happen? As though the city has some unilateral power to suddenly go in and just do all of this, when the city really is a way to simply leverage and extract and connect partners in many of these instances. It's about what democracy really means at the local level, I think, is a key question. But the last thing, I just want to reinforce this intertemporal dimension, because I think it's almost always lost. Most of my citizens want our policies around homelessness to be humane, to pay attention to mental health, to pay attention to the human dimension of homelessness. Almost all of the calls that we get day to day are, somebody needs to go out and arrest all the people that are camping 2 doors down from my house. Right? If we were as responsive in the moment to every one of the citizen complaints and what their felt needs in the moment are on that issue or on a police shooting or anything else, we would shift from being one of the most progressive local governments in our region to the most progressive one instantly. And that's not a slap at our citizens. That's human nature, and it's part of the reason why this notion of government as a compact really does matter. That we're not simply an agglomeration of consumers that we need to attend to and their individual needs in the moment.
So, represent you who, was that you who yelled out Singapore? So I was actually thinking I would really want to get you to weigh in on this. So Rick Cole, for those who don't know, city manager of Santa Monica, former deputy mayor in LA, and a longtime public servant who has spent decades thinking through public engagement, has really been at the forefront of radical 21st century notions of inclusive engagement. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on this conversation.
Well, I've gone to hell, which is Santa Monica, the most engaged community. It is not a college town, although we have a community college that's probably the best in the state. I came for answers, not to give them, but I'm playing with this concept from the medical world of informed consent, where in effect, all of the questions you were asking, Christopher, about that at some level are technical. There still is a minority of citizens, particularly in highly engaged, who actually do want to weigh in on how long the traffic lanes are, or exactly the color of the slides. And so what I'm struggling with is we go to a doctor now, and the doctor in the old days, the doctor would say, well, you're sick, and this is what you have, and this is how I'm going to treat you. And you were, unless you were a Christian Scientist, you were at their mercy. Now, as soon as the doctor says you have blah, 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 you're looking that up on your phone and finding that there's 6, everything from Chinese traditional medicine to the latest cutting-edge genetic tools, and you're now in an engagement in which you still have a doctor, and you're still looking to that doctor for advice, and ultimately you're going to go to the doctor to perform a procedure, whether it's acupuncture or chemotherapy. But you need to be involved at some level, and for different people it'll be different, and based upon the severity of your symptoms it'll be different. It's like, okay, I've got a sore knee, fine, but okay, terminal cancer, now I'm really going to be engaged in this. So I offer that as a vocabulary from a different discipline to see whether that resonates and whether that creates some good answers or whether it raises more questions than it solves.
So I'm going to extend that metaphor because I'm not in the community, obviously, but from what I understand, doctors hate that, right? Like my doctor's always telling me, don't look up your symptoms online. Like you're just going to freak yourself out, and it's probably not that thing. And there's all this crazy stuff on the internet that isn't valid. And the doctor isn't necessarily able to interact with the information that their patients are receiving in any way that helps create trust, right? Like a patient hears from doctor that they have X, they go online, they see all this other stuff, and immediately they're like, I don't trust my doctor anymore. They're telling me it's something else, but the internet is, there's all this information about what else it could be, and I don't think they're really being honest with me. And there's no way for the doctor to sort of interact with that information in a way that creates trust. And I feel like we have similar cycle in government where we've built all these tools to empower the citizen to speak and to find information, but the government is sort of looped out of that process in a way. Like given talks about how we've built all these citizen engagement tools that make it easier for citizens to speak, but we haven't built very many tools to make it easy for government to hear what they're saying and really turn it into intelligence that they can then respond to, let people know that they've been heard, and incorporate it into the decision-making process. So, and that, having said that, I'm wondering what we think the role for technology is in this whole paradigm that we've laid out, and how we can start building things that encode practices that will help us both support government officials who are trying to make these hard decisions about where the dump goes, and they don't want to, you can't take people's worst instincts and really incorporate those, but also helps citizens feel like they're empowered and answers some of those, closes the feedback loop.
I think technology has at least probably lots, but at least two key roles to play. One is improving our sensing, our ability to derive both directly and indirectly preferences, needs, pain points, all those issues, and we're horrible at that. Right, so even the data that we already have, we don't use in that way. But the technology opens up lots and lots of ways for us to do that in ways that are driven by citizens in ways that don't require them to take the night off. Right, so we could have much better sensing technology that would give us more insight, deeper insight, without necessarily full-blown user testing and all of that. But also on the deliberation side, we don't share our deliberation. Right, because we set up this adversarial system, and where there's only one choice to make. I'm voting yes or no, and it's the end of the public hearings after 5 other workshops before. So we all know what's going to happen in this meeting. And at the end, people have come in. They've said, arrest all the homeless people. I'm not going to vote that way, but I'm not going to say anything because they're all in the room. So we've it's just made it worse. Mm-hmm. And then we arrest all the homeless people because I lose the vote. And at the end, all the people who thought, well, I thought we were going to be the most humane city in the region. Government's failed me. This whole process is a waste. So the other thing I think technology can help us do is communicate in both directions, the process of deliberation. I was looking at some of the work on storytelling from data. Yes, it's useful to us in terms of dashboarding and that sort of thing, but helping citizens understand in a way that is comprehensible and doesn't require them to read a 12-page staff report, the trends and the things that are influencing our decisions, and also to see the data of theirs that we're using for that purpose. Right, so I think that's part of the question that you had asked earlier, which I think is still relevant in this one, is, okay, so we're not having a meeting where everybody comes, but so we've decided to do a dog park, and it's based on the following sets of information, including these sets of information that when you texted in every time that you were at a tot lot or a dog park or a water fountain or a sand lot, this is where this is showing up. And we never do that. We just put up a sign, coming soon, with my name on it. Here comes the tot lot. And so technology, I think, gives us a lot more tools to be able to, in big and particularly in small, low attention ways, to be able to share that story.
Are there tools you wish you had that you don't have that would help make that process better, easier, more responsive?
I don't know.
I'll let you think about it.
Yeah, there's a lot of creative people in this room.
Okay, let's hear from you guys.
Just briefly, the technology piece is along the ideas of meeting people where they are. Some of it is either through social media or, again, lowering the cost of actually doing polling on behalf of the city, where you can make sure you select at least from different cities, different parts of the town, or different demographics, so at least you feel you're at least asking a broader array of opinions, again, sort of like city voices, maybe some limited choices, maybe some open-ended, so at least it gets better quality information, specifically trying to make it more representative. That's at least a possibility, but that does take time and effort. Some people are suspicious. The government's calling me for my opinion, how to get my number, what you really need. I'm not interested in those things.
Is Julie Steenson in the room from Kansas City? Okay, so this is a plug for one of the talks on Friday, and I believe Julie's doing a breakout, maybe it's after this session, about citizen surveys. They do one in Kansas City that is really robust. They publish all of the responses, and it's part of their performance metrics. So they are holding department heads accountable to not only like metrics like how fast did you respond to the 911 call, but also the citizen satisfaction scores. So it's a really interesting tool. Okay, here first.
So my sense of just my sense of the situation, it seems like the tough part as a politician or a person in our government is to sort of sell people on that compact and continually sell people on that compact in the face of their own self-interest, their impulse responses to questions about their preference. So technology presents us the opportunity not just to gather data about their preferences, but I think it also presents us an easier opportunity to convey to them the compact that they're in, and to remind them of that every time they kind of bring up some really self-interested natural response that we've all had towards troublesome things around us. But they have to remember that we make decisions sometimes based on a greater collective good, and you signed on for that and you're getting this out of it. So don't forget that you're getting this out of it, even though we're not using it. Let's go back to where you're at now. So one thing that you pointed out earlier, which was really great, is that we're gathering all this information, and we have to respond with it. We have to use it for a response that shows that we've done something with the questions that we've asked them and their responses. Otherwise, it's actually a really dangerous exercise that we discourage them, because they're answering questions, making requests of us, and nothing ever happens. That's even more ejecting than if you could just not ask it.
Okay, here, I'm just gonna go this way. So here, yeah.
So, as someone who's been part of the community meetings and someone who has organized the meetings on behalf of elected officials, the one word that always comes to mind is authenticity, right? It is, you could throw everyone in the room, and even if you're talking at us in a different way, we know whether you really wanted to listen to us or whether you didn't. And I guess the struggle I have when thinking about technology is, how do you convey that sense of authenticity? Because you're removing, I can't look at you in the eye to know that you're actually reading my response. So how have you sort of dealt with that?
I think that is true. It also has some perverse implications, though, because the let's all get in a room and have a community meeting where we look each other in the eye and talk to each other directly. What I did find in those when I was the kid on the council and going all over the place was that was not that discouraged participation from people who were different. Who didn't feel safe, who, to use today's nomenclature, did not feel safe in the room, didn't speak the language. It was great for those folks who connected, like we're the neighborhood or whatever. But in terms of broadening the conversation, in some sense, the technology provides a mediated way for people to participate, where they know they can, if they don't understand something, they can look it up and then give their feedback. Right? They don't have to, ask the dumb question. They don't have to ask it with an accent. They can figure out how they want to contribute to that conversation. So I wouldn't write off the in-person stuff as always being of a lesser quality or less authentic participation, because the diversity of the citizenry often does not come forward in the traditional meeting sense. But I think you can through the technology tools in many cases demonstrate authenticity. When folks are now providing input quicker, like in real time to me on Twitter while they're sitting in the bus stop or whatever, and they get a response from me or from the city's PIO within 5 minutes, it's actually in some sense more powerful than if I'd been at the meeting saying, yes, I hear you, and nothing ever happened. They can then trace the line of activity. So it's the follow-up as much as the eye contact, the actual response to the issue that's getting raised, I think that can help to mitigate some of that.
Yeah, and I mean, are there any content designers in the room, writers? Oh, hi, from Philly, right? Yeah, so you've been hired by the city of Philadelphia to write content for the website that is authentic and relevant to people. So do you have any thoughts to that question?
Yeah, I worked in user experience design also, so I have actually participated in the journalistic outreach as well. But yeah, I think actually that there are ways that we have to embrace things and to think about how to communicate that from the perspective of the person who's genuinely interested in asking the question. That usually government is just kind of like putting that information out there. Here's the date of the meeting, here's the place of the meeting, here's what's going to be discussed. If you can say it in a way where it's clear that, here are some of the viewpoints or questions that are possibly going to be brought up, I think it automatically adds more immediacy and more engagement that people can respond to whether or not that issue will be.
Yeah, and I just want to point out, this is something that we run into surprisingly often, is people who, maybe it's from some just sort of irrational fear of technology, think that we're trying to supplant public meetings with technology. This is about complementing and offering additional channels for participation that do create ways for people that wouldn't participate in a face-to-face meeting to access the public conversation. And the hat, and then go to you.
So I've been working in civic tech from the urban planning perspective and focusing on placemaking, digital placemaking. And in working in different cities, I guess the question that comes to my mind is, are we solving the wrong model? So a lot of planning, at least especially place-based stuff, is waterfall, right? It's very linear. We're trying to predict, right? So we think we can add more technology, more data to predict, to make sure everything's happy. But the question that comes up is that even really what we should be trying to do versus a more agile, iterative approach, which is about being responsive. So, if they came wanting a dog park, let's quickly just set one up in a very tactical, urbanism style manner. And then people realize, well, actually, there's kids too, so we should change differently. But that's more like, to use for the engineers in the room, it's like when Linus Torvalds created Git, he was like, you can't fix subversion, you can't fix CBS. That's why we need something different. So sorry for that. So, but it's the same type of paradigm of like, if we have sort of like a system that some things like high-speed rail, and big long-term plan, you can't really do high-speed rail here. But a lot of place-based, a lot of cities, municipal issues are place-based. So I'm wondering if that is also kind of like, if we're thinking about participation, we need to rethink just what is the model that we're trying to accelerate or to make more efficient. And that's, how do you do that? It's iterative on dog parks and gardens is relatively easy, but it gets tricky. I feel like there's a gap in methods for iterative approaches.
Can I take you home with me when we're done with this? Because this is Waterfall approach is how all government works. It's not just about procurement. It's not just about technology. It's definitely about planning, where you're supposed to design the ultimate end for the entire city or for some large district, exactly how it's going to be, and where we have analyzed and mitigated against every possible bad thing that could happen through an EIR that's 500 pages, right? That's I mean, you could. It's. I think it's worse than the technology version of waterfall planning in some sense. Even though we're not the ones building 99% of it. I mean, I'm building the roads and the sewer and the stuff underneath, but everything else has to happen by other people doing it. So it's a complete. And so it sets up an expectation among the participants that is unrealistic, but also that really hones in on how do we make sure nothing bad happens. So this is the Santa Monica problem, right? This is okay. Our whole job here is to make sure that nothing could go wrong ever. And so part of the engagement question that I've been struggling with over the last year or two is how to rethink engagement about being less about opinion and more about doing. I'm as interested in engaging people to take action, to start a small business, to organize a community group, to just to lead a guerrilla brigade, to clean up a park or what. But where that is actually privileged in the civic conversation, as opposed to just armchair opinion, which we have elevated in the law as being everything, and that so that folks who are willing to take the iterative actions to move the place forward and take a few chances and maybe get some things wrong, that is celebrated and not essentially made illegal as it is under our current processes.
Yeah.
So I have a comment that may or may not be productive, but then I'll have a question. So I've been thinking about this, and I think the thing that's missing from this sort of discussion, but it exists in the real world, and I'm starting to reflect on and realize that it happens at the municipal level and then also on the side of these sort of, at the sort of community meetings we're talking about, and that's like issues of corruption among public officials and also incompetence, which we know happens. Both cases happen and they lead to problems. And it's easy to think of dramatic new ways and technology to fix things and lead to greater civic participation. But those problems don't really go away, because if you look at historically, they just don't go away. But also on that side, the corruption usually is born out of self-interest, and incompetence is just, it happens. And I'm starting to realize that even at say the community meeting, you basically have these same problems, but they're sort of on the citizen side. The citizen is thinking they're prioritizing their self-interest over the interests of their government compact. That's corruption. And, some people are also incompetent. Not much you can say about that. So that's just a comment. But then my question is, sort of when you're talking about sort of raising awareness and almost educating on this sort of compact that we engage into, or maybe reminding people of it. We talked about the danger of that being paternalistic, but I still see the urge to if it's park planning or if it's infrastructure, to raise awareness or educate people on how to make good decisions about these things, because we society has been around long enough that we've gotten pretty good at this, despite the fact that people distrust it. And we know that teenagers need a basketball court. We've done the research, and we're experts. How do you educate citizens without being paternalistic? And on the same side, how do you tell a city council member or a public official you need to accept two-way feedback and sort of provide history, but how do you also avoid patronizing them as an official?
Well, just on the corrupt and incompetent officials, you make it sound like that's a very rare phenomenon. It's quite common, and so I definitely don't want to suggest in any way that the point here is simply to unplug the engagement strategies that we've tried in order to defer to the existing elites. That's not the answer. I just know that the 20th century answers through technology is not the right one either. But simply leaving it to elected officials to make all the decisions in our best interest is not the right outcome either. Now I forgot what your actual statement was.
Well, just if you're trying to raise awareness, right?
Yes. Okay. So this, it's the right question, but this part of what I struggle about is this county issue for me. That I know nothing about what the county's doing on mental health or probation or the library system, are all very, very important things that are essential to my life, and I don't want to. Right. So there has to be a space, and I don't have to right now unless Nick or Christine, who are crazy, they get engaged and start going to the meetings and saying that they want to shut down mental health and put everybody in jail. Then I have to go, right? Because you have created competitive engagement, essentially, right? Because some of these questions are not just about what's good for me, but they're also, there's the nature of democracy is about that battle that is occurring. So if you have created venues where people that are, don't share my values are going to be empowered, I have to go now. So you've reduced my quality of life dramatically by creating this forced opportunity for me to engage. So our experience in things like the ballot initiatives, where we said, okay, it would be better if we gave every voter had the full guide, legislative analysis of the proposition so that they can be better informed. And we thought we would get better outcomes. We have not got, people don't read it. In fact, they read less than they used to because it's longer. So I don't know what the answer is, but I think, but I do think it's a bit of the answer isn't just more education, because it often ignores the severe cost in terms of attention for the folks that we're trying to educate.
So we've just got a few minutes left, and I'm just going to do 3 rapid fire questions without us answering. So here, and here, and if we have time, we'll get you in too.
So rapid fire, I'm interested in using technology to do ethnographic qualitative research, sentiment analysis. I've got 1,900 sticky notes from 350 citizens that I'm going through rigorously and coding and keywording it with meaning and things. So I'm looking for access to nature. I'm looking for a place to connect. I'm looking for a place where youth can contribute. When we get at framing what it is we're solving for, then those choices make sense. But I've only asked you about the part. It's hard for me to make sense out of the decision. So who is using technology for sense making that is qualitative, not quantitative? Because coding and keywording these things is a really inefficient but meaningful process.
I think, was it Ali? Yeah.
Yes. So it sounds like in West Sacramento you are onto something, making progress, and that you personally have the support of the electorate that sort of gives you a little bit of this flexibility to open the feedback process up to forums. But how do you persuade either your colleagues in West Sacramento, maybe on city council, who their elections are closer, or people in other cities that are just not as far along in the thought process, that the feedback they get from these other forums should be listened to just as loudly as the feedback in person at city council? Because I imagine that even if in theory you want to count them as equal, when you're staring at people, a line of people who want to comment in a meeting, it might be hard to retain all the stuff you would have heard through an online forum or something like that.
And here.
Are you using in West Sacramento at all visual storytelling urban screens, using artists to tell the story of how you like the results, and just to basically know the changes you make.
So any and all of that you want to address and give your final
in 10
thoughts
seconds.
here?
So we're not doing the storytelling. What we were talking about earlier and what you just said, I want to be doing more of that, and it's partly to the question that you raised around sort of extensibility and sustainability among other electeds that don't. You do develop some sense of both connection and confidence about it after however many decades it has been. So that's definitely the case. But I do one role for technology to play is to aggregate these different forms of public engagement and input and data and call them that. Right, so this is the other challenge. We do get some of this data, but that's just data, and then the public hearing is the public input part. If more dashboards, if more ways in which we decision policymakers get the information, displays other forms of public data, public behavior, public needs, public pain points, all that stuff as public input. So that that's just not technical information, and the hearing is the only thing. I do think that's definitely a need, so that policymakers can see that there are other ways to sense public need other than just what's happening in the moment, and part of that's just naming.
Great. Well, I want to thank all of you guys for being so engaged in the engagement panel, and of course to Mayor Cabaldon, who's been a fantastic city partner for us. I will give 2 plugs. One is for actually the citizen satisfaction survey workshop, where Julie from Kansas City will be talking about how she designs those and how they have influenced processes in the city. I don't know when it is, but you guys all have your programs. I think it might be at 4:30 today in this room. Okay. Oh my God, we were the opening act. That's fantastic. And then, of course, the West Sacramento Fellows, who will be presenting their app when? On the main stage Friday morning. And then we at Code for America have a new engagement standard that is sort of outlining our point of view on this, and you can find it at c4a.me/engagement standard, and we'll be talking about it in more detail on the main stage on Friday after West Sacramento's presentation. So thank you so much.